Provincial Parliament. A very warm welcome to you all on this Friday, the 11th of June. Our meeting is quorate and it has just gone 9 o'clock. I'd like to welcome the members present, the members of the POC that are present. I'd like to welcome the parliamentary officials that are joining us, and a very warm welcome to the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, and the Secretary of Parliament. I have received no apologies for this meeting. And of course, my name is Mireille Wenger, and I'm the chair of this committee. Before we get into the meat of the meeting, I'm just going to remind everyone about the rules for virtual engagement. All members have been muted, as is custom. We ask that if you need to raise any points of order to please do so using the hand function. All audio and video should be switched off to improve the quality of the line. However, if you are making a contribution, please do feel free to use your cameras. We ask that if there are any presentations that are being flighted, once the presentation is concluded, if you would then unshare the presentation. Right, on that note, I see there's a hand from Honourable Mackenzie. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm speaking in the NCOP this morning. My colleague Deirdre Bartma will stand in for me and she will join us soon. But I just thought as soon as I leave that she will be here, just for the record, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Honourable Mackenzie. We will make note of that. All right, so today our meeting is to have a look at the fourth quarterly performance and financial information for the 2020-2021 financial year. Also feedback on any instructions that might have been issued in terms of Section 37 and 66 of the FAMPLA. And finally, some insights into readiness of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament for the implementation of the Protection of Personal Information Act, the POPIA of 2013, which has some requirements for institutions by the end of the month. So on that note, a very warm welcome to you all. I'd like to welcome the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, good morning. Would you like to make any introductory remarks?
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning to the members of the committee. And obviously, Chair, I think as the convention, we would like just to introduce the entire team. I'm here with the Secretary, the SMT, and the Office of the Speaker. We are here to present as requested by the POC, and we are ready to take questions, and any kind of contributions are welcome to ensure that we are continuously accountable to this committee as required by FAMPLA. And we have provided the information that the chairperson in the committee has requested from Parliament. And I now would like to ask the Secretary at the SMT to introduce themselves. Chairperson, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Please be welcome.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Speaker. Good morning, Deputy Speaker, honourable members and colleagues of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament Administration. Chairperson, maybe just an apology up front. Mr. Stimele, the Director of Parliamentary Support Services, had tendered an apology. He had a prior doctor's commitment that he couldn't move, but he will join us as soon as he has been attended to. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Chairperson, I'll then ask the directors to introduce themselves, and then the other managers that are also in attendance. Maybe if you would allow me, Chairperson, the fourth quarterly performance report will be presented by Ms. Genevieve Eckham, the manager in the Office of the Secretary and caretaker manager in the Directorate Strategy and Institutional Oversight. The fourth quarterly financial statements will be presented by Mr. Dawood Jawuddin, the manager in our Financial Directorate. The readiness of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament in terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act will be presented by Advocate Andre Leroux, the Senior Legal Advisor and also the Deputy Information Officer. Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going to ask the directors just to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, members and colleagues. Vernon Titus, Institutional Enablement.
Good morning, Chairperson, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, honourable members, colleagues. Nicole Peterson, Chief Financial Officer.
Right, I think that's everybody. I'll then ask the members to introduce themselves, please. Sorry, Mr. Secretary.
Chairperson, just another apology. Apology for Ms. Sunel Fouchier, the Director PEO. She is on leave this week, but Mr. James Retief is representing the Directorate. Thank you, ma'am.
Perfect, noted. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chairperson. Ricardo Mackenzie.
Good morning.
Good morning, Deirdre Bartman.
Morning, Honourable Bartman.
Good morning, Regan Allen.
Morning, Honourable Allen. All right, with those introductions done and some opening remarks from the Speaker, I just want to check, Deputy Speaker, would you like to make any remarks before we get into the briefings?
Thanks, Chair, and good morning to everybody. No, not from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so let's get going. According to the agenda I have before me, we're going to start with the fourth quarterly performance report for 2020-2021, which I believe Ms. Ackham will be leading. So I'll hand straight over to you, Ms. Ackham. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Deputy Speaker, Speaker, and the members and colleagues. The fourth quarter performance report was tabled on the 29th of April. So the full details of the report was provided to the POC. So I will just do a high-level presentation. If there's any questions afterwards, I'll ask my colleagues to assist me with answering the questions. Okay, moving on to the high-level summary. The WCPP had 38 performance indicators for the current financial year for 2020-21. In terms of the fourth quarter, there were 30 planned targets. And if we break it down per program, Program 1, Governance, Leadership and Administration, there was 9 planned targets, 6 was achieved and 3 was partially achieved. Program 2, Parliamentary Support Services, there were 7 planned, 6 was achieved and 1 partially achieved. In terms of Program 3, Public Engagement, 10 were planned, 5 were achieved, 4 not achieved, and there was 1 that was partially achieved. And the fourth program, which is Member Support, there were 4 planned targets, 1 was achieved, 1 not achieved, and 2 were not applicable. Essentially, 18 targets in total were achieved, which equates to a 64% achievement. So moving on to a breakdown per program and sub-program. In terms of the Office of the Speaker, there was 1 target for the quarter and 1 was partially achieved. Office of the Secretary, 3 planned, 1 achieved, 2 partially achieved. Financial Management, 2 planned and both were achieved. In Institutional Enablement, 3 planned, 3 were achieved. So that in total is a 67% achievement in this program. Moving on to the reasons for the deviations. In terms of the Speaker's Office and the Secretary's Office, the indicator that is there relates to the compliance to FAMPLA. There is accounting officer responsibility and there is executive authority responsibility. So for both areas, 1 target, 1 requirement was not achieved, and that was in terms of Section 8.2.1a that relates to the performance agreement of the accounting officer. The requirement says that you have to conclude it within 1 week after the start of the financial year. As we remember, last year was the start of the hard lockdown in early April. So there was an opportunity to finalize that performance agreement. Subsequently, we have concluded it on the 21st of May, which was outside the period of what is prescribed by the Act. But we have addressed that issue, and for the current financial year 21-22, we have made sure that we achieved that target, and we have concluded the performance agreement of the accounting officer on the 7th of April. I will skip the Secretary's Office because that was the same explanation for that one. Okay, moving on to the Secretary's second target that were partially achieved, and that relates to the planned APP program performance indicators that were set out in the annual performance plan. The target was that we achieved 96% of that. The actual achievement were 28 targets and 10 targets were not achieved. In the summary page that I showed earlier on, I showed 5 targets achieved and 5 partially achieved. The reason why it's shown 10 here as not achieved is that in terms of our reporting to the Auditor General, there is no provision for partial achievement. So we have to indicate the partial achievement as fully not achieved. The reasons for the deviations will be connected to the relevant sub-programs that have not achieved their targets. Then moving on to Parliamentary Support Services, Program 2, Plenary Support. There were 2 planned targets. 1 was achieved, 1 partially achieved. Committee Support, 1 planned, and that 1 was achieved. Hansard Service as well, the target planned was achieved. And under Sergeant at Arms, 3 were planned and 3 was achieved. So that in total was 86% achievement for the 4th quarter. Moving on to the reasons for deviations. The first one is in plenary support. It relates to the digest of rulings to be compiled and distributed before the end of the financial year. This digest of rulings were compiled from 1 April 2020 to 28 February, but because there were sittings late in March, it wasn't able to be finalized and public and distributed before 31 March. We after implementing this target, we picked up that it's not really practical to have it at that period to be compiled and distributed before 31 March, because usually there's some sittings that is quite late up until 31 March. So we, during the current financial year, will have a look at that target and also adjust the technical indicator just to make it more practical for us to be able to achieve that target. And then moving on to public engagement, the first sub-program there is stakeholder management and communication services. 3 were planned for the quarter, 1 was achieved, 1 partially achieved, and 1 was not achieved. Public education and outreach, 7 planned, 4 achieved, and 3 were not achieved. So that there is about a 50% achievement. 5 of the 10 targets were achieved. Okay, into the deviations. The first target there was supposed to be a 5% increase on website statistics in respect of website sessions. During the last financial year 2021, there were some technical issues connected to the website. There was a new service provider appointed, and after discussions, they finally resolved the technical issue. The actual achievement of that target was actually 5,840 less than the baseline of the previous financial year. But with the corrections and the technical issues resolved, we are confident that this problem won't be in the current financial year, and we will be able to increase the website sessions with 5%. Okay, moving on to the second target that were not achieved. It relates to the international relations framework. Should have been approved. This framework is made up of 3 documents, which is the policy, plan, and strategy. The policy and plan was finalized and approved. We're still currently working on the strategy, which we anticipate will be concluded during the 2nd quarter of this financial year. Moving on to public education and outreach. The first one there is the number of education initiatives rolled out in accordance with the annual program. We had a plan for 24 initiatives to be rolled out. The actual achievement was 6, and this was affected by COVID and the restrictions on meeting with the public. This target can't be caught up in the new financial year, but although the target, we have a target of 24 for the 21-22 financial year, we have brought in different ways of dealing with the implementation of this target, and we are confident that we will be able to meet this target in the current financial year. And then moving to public education and outreach, the target was that there should be a formalized process for dealing with submissions. The document have been prepared, quite a lot of consultation went in it. We are still busy with that and it hasn't been finalized yet. So the documents still need further refinement before we can submit for improvement and before improvement discussion with the chairperson's forum. Skip one. And then the last one under program 3 relates to the MOU with the Commission for Gender Equality. That document was sent to them on the 16th of March. It wasn't finalized at the end of March, but in further status update, they confirmed that they have received the document. The legal team is currently looking at it. I think they're meeting today and then they'll be able to provide feedback to us. So we're hoping to finalize this document in the first quarter or early in the second quarter. And moving on to program 4, member support. Enabling allowances, there was 2 planned targets. One was achieved, one not achieved. Under political support, 1 planned, 1 not applicable. Political party support, 1 planned and 1 not applicable. The reasoning, the first target is that was not achieved relates to the review and update of the self-service portal. We currently on Sage X3 and this program, they were not able to implement this online service portal, but after discussions, we have decided to move on to Sage 300. And in here, they are busy in the process of implementing a replacement where they look at new platforms that will allow members to submit their claims online. And in addition to this, the ITDS team is planning to further simplify the expense claim process through handheld devices such as cellular phones. This is included in the current financial year and we're running out on that. Oh, and in the last sub-program, which is under the political support and relates to secretarial allowances and constituency allowances. Well, the target is that we pay the claims within, or the transfer payments within 5 working days. As all the payments were done up until the 3rd quarter, there was no payments outstanding for the 4th quarters. So we couldn't report on that, and that's why we are reflecting the actual achievement as not applicable. So that, Chairperson, is the summary overview of the 4th quarter performance information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Akam. I'd just like to test with the members were there any questions at this stage. I see Honourable Lekker has joined us. Good morning, Honourable Lekker. Okay, right. If members would then just indicate by show of hands if they have any questions. I have a question, if I may. I just want to get to the right page. One moment. Okay, yes, so my first question is, if I may, is on the Program 1, Governance, Leadership and Administration, which is the performance agreement for the accounting officer. That was last year already. I'd just like to understand, does it appear in the 4th quarter that we're reviewing now because it's an annual target? If I could just get clarity on that, please.
May I respond, Chairperson?
Yes, please.
Yes, the implementation or the compliance to the FAMPLA requirements is stretched over the full year. And we put it in the 4th quarter, but quarterly or monthly, there is requirements that we have to achieve. So this target will include the monthly financial statements, the quarterly performance information, the budgets that we need to table and so forth. So we keep it in the 4th quarter because it stretches right over the year. So this was the one target that was due very early in the 1st quarter, but because it's a 4th quarter target, it is only reported on in the 4th quarter, but it does contain information over the full financial year.
Got it. Thank you. And then, as a matter of course, do you put the annual targets into the fourth quarter?
Thanks, Chairperson. Yes, we do. We put it in the fourth quarter because it would be too many to break it up into quarterly. But we do monitor it on a monthly basis, and we do report to the Executive Authority on a monthly basis of the compliance to FAMPLA. So it's monitored right through the year, but we only report on it physically in the quarterly performance report at the end of the financial year. And that is how we calculate the percentage compliance, because 100% is over the full year.
Super, thank you. Then if I may continue on program 3, public engagement, public and outreach partnerships established. Can I just understand what does CGE stand for? And then to understand what the MOU will look like with the CGE that's due to be finalized this month. And then what is the role of the local government department in this project?
Chairperson, the CGE stands for the Commission for Gender Equality. If I may ask James Retief just to give some more information relating to the other two questions.
Good morning, Chairperson. I'm afraid that I'm not really able to provide much information on the content of the MOU and the role of the local government departments, but I will get the information together and provide it to the committee.
Thank you very much. So that would be the partnership with CGE, and then also what is the role of the Department of Local Government as well, please?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker?
Chairperson, let me just help here. The correspondence that I signed, we do a lot of work from time to time with the Commission for Gender Equality on issues of gender-based violence, gender sensitization, especially at workplace, which the Western Cape Provincial Parliament occupies a very unique role as the legislative sector head in the province. So sometimes our work involves moving around in municipalities. It then enables us to also create that kind of a relationship with local government. Structures like SALGA. At times we do work with them. Like now we've got a youth program on the 28th of this month, and we work with municipalities across the board. So those relationships need to be strengthened. And also later on, we've got a women's parliament led by the Deputy Speaker and the CWP. So we've got to have that structured relationship which exists. It's just that we're formalizing those kind of engagements. Thank you, Chairperson and the members of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Then my next question is on members' support program 4. And this is the story of SAGE, which seems to have been a bit of a headache, generally speaking. Could we get a bit more information on what's happened now and the discontinuation of SAGE X3? What is the plan going forward for this, and how does it affect members' support as a result of this? Thank you.
Chairperson, if Mr. Titus can maybe respond to your question, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. As we've reported before, Chairperson, we're not speaking of the entire X3 enterprise resource planning system. We are talking about the HR module, which directly links with staff, that's payroll, as well as the rest of the HR module that we are looking at. With regard to the X3, the challenges have been in payroll itself, the configuration parts, the complete dependency that the administration has on consultants to configure the payroll system or any changes to the system, etc. We also know that the AG and internal audit have identified some challenges with regard to overarching controls in the system, and we have experienced challenges with regard to actual integration between the payroll system as well as the general ledger accounts from the finance part of the system. In trying to assess, we've gone through a very rigorous process, Chair, to assess the functionality and the applicability of the Sage 300 of the Sage X3 system. We have tried in the instance of enabling members to do online claims. We have tried with the service providers to upgrade the X3 system and found it not to be suitable. At the same time, the service provider has indicated, Sage has indicated to us that they are discontinuing the Sage X3 people part of their package. They've discontinued it within South Africa and, in fact, in the entire Africa. So they're not continuing with that as a product because I think they have realized that it is not suitable for the conditions within our country specifically. We have looked and have done extensive investigation into what would be suitable in the stable of Sage. Sage X3, Sage 300 is a suitable package. It supports out of box all the areas that is required. We are at the stage where we have approval to move over into Sage 300, Chairperson. We are at the stage where we are busy rolling out. We've got the service level agreement with a service provider who would be assisting us with the implementation, and we are in preparation of our blueprints as well as the finalization of our procurement process for this so that the project can ensue. It is intended that Sage 300 will be rolled out during this particular financial year. The internal audit will form part of that particular process, Chair, in conducting some of the migration aspects to ensure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. I think that is what I can say for now, where we are busy. There is complete oversight over the process, and there is confirmation that the Sage 300 is completely compatible with the rest of X3 that is still being operated on in the financial and other parts of the organization. That is all from my side for now, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Titus. So does this mean that there have been, or let me rather ask it, have there been any issues of over or underpayment of any staff members or members, or miscalculation of leave as a result of this problem in the system in that quarter under review?
Chair, to my knowledge, there's been no over or underpayments. I'm going to ask for that particular quarter. I'm going to ask Ms. Prakasam just to confirm that for us, please, Chairperson.
Thank you, because I'll come back to this question again when we go through the financials and the direct charge, which shows an underspend. So I'd just like to understand if those are related. Thanks, Ms. Prakasam.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you. I can confirm, as Mr. Titus has indicated, that to our knowledge, there has been no over or underpayments with regard to leave.
Okay, so that's one question, over or underpayment with regards to leave, but what about over or underpayments with regards to salaries for either members or staff members?
Chair, again, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any overpayments or underpayments in this regard.
In this particular quarter?
Yes.
Because it has occurred previously.
In terms of previous quarters, Chair, I would have to confirm and revert in that regard.
Okay, well, I can confirm that there were over and underpayments previously, but we know that there was a lot of work done to resolve that. So basically what I'd like to understand is whether it's now reverted or whether we're still managing to keep it correct. I see the secret. Well, it's like a Christmas tree, lots of hands up and down. Mr. Secretary, I saw your hand, but it's now down, and Mr. Titus' hand's up. So whichever two of you would like to respond. Oh, there we go. Mr. Secretary, I'll recognize you first.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, with regards to the occurrence of the errors in payments in a previous quarter, or even in a previous financial year, Mr. Titus and the team had then put additional controls in place in terms of checking and those type of things. And therefore, like Mr. Titus and Ms. Prakasima has indicated, in the fourth quarter of the 2020-2021 financial year, as I sit here today on the 11th of the 6th, 2021, there has not been reported any over or underpayments in terms of salaries to members or to staff. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you for that confirmation, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Titus, would you like to add?
No, thank you, Chair. I'm covered by what the Secretary had said. Just further confirmation. Thank you, Chair.
Super. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied. Honourable Bartman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, on page 15, similar to the SAGE, the one official, apologies, I can't remember the surname now, which official it was, indicated that there were some matters of the previous SAGE X3 that were not suitable for the country, and that there was stuff that they need to move over because now the new package is suitable. If they could just explain to me what the suitable and not suitable for the country and for the system means. And also on that same page, it says that it could not have been implemented. It was WCP is not in a position to achieve this deliverable based on factors outside of its control. If what was the factors outside of the control? And then on page 8, regarding the parliamentary support services under plenary support, it speaks to the digest of rulings which gets compiled, and obviously they had the last 3 dates in March, which there were also sittings, which is why it could not be finalized before the 31st of March. And we are in June now, so I just want to find out, is this complete yet? And if so, is it a document that gets sent out to everyone, such as members, for example, in order to see the list of rulings? Is it a book, or is it just a list that they keep? And is the digest of rulings something that comes out every year? And where are we able to access those particular digest of rulings, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over to the administration.
Chair, if I could respond to the Honourable Bartman's question. The SAGE X3 system, people, is utterly dependent on configuration. So I'll ask Mr. Skriker to speak about it a little later, but it's utterly dependent on configuration, and so out of box as a platform for people management. We are dependent on consultants coming in and doing various parts of configuration, even if we want to do salary increases or if we want to do back pay. There is a requirement then that the service provider would come in and they would be doing the configuration, because we don't have that kind of technical expertise within the organization. This has been found, SAGE has found this to be the case throughout the country, that this particular module of people in their stable is dependent on other kinds of configurations and less control within the administration or within the function. And that is why they have found, not only within the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, but with all their clients throughout the country, that is not a suitable way of how to deal with people management from a platform supporting base. And that is why the service, and this is the point that I wanted to make pertaining to Sage as the company, who have decided to discontinue the Sage X3 people part of the stable of that product that they have rolled out. So they don't do X3 people anymore because of the fact that the actual platform is not necessarily suitable for how we do business within the country. And perhaps Mr. Skriker will be able to provide some of the technical responses. But I think suffice to say, Chair, that those are the external factors that we are referring to, because we intended initially to upgrade the system in X3, and with a Sage company discontinuing that is something that certainly the WCPP has no control over. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Bartman, are those all your questions covered?
Chairperson.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. Maybe just with regards to the digest of rulings. The digest of rulings was circulated on the 29th of April, and I'm just sharing the front page of the document that was circulated. It was also sent to all support staff in the political parties, Chairperson. It is an annual document that is circulated. It was just all about the timing of when the document gets circulated, because if we were to circulate and publish the document in March, there's the likelihood that the latter sessions in March would not be included, and that's why we would have changed the timing in terms of our APP, that it rather gets published in the first quarter of the new financial year for the previous financial year, so that the digest of rulings covers the entire period in terms of the reporting period. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Honourable Bartman, are those all your questions covered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, super. If there are no further questions, then let's move on to the quarterly financial statements for 2020-2021. I see you, Mr. Jawedin. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson, Speaker, and Deputy Speaker and Committee. I'll share.
Chairperson, apologies.
Oh, sorry. Is that a new hand, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Chairperson, it is a new hand. Before we just conclude on the performance information, Chairperson, if I can maybe just, if you would allow me, maybe just 2 minutes just for a bit of a teaser, Chairperson. Yes, Chairperson, up to now, and members and Speaker and Deputy Speaker, up to now, we've only been providing hard copy quarterly reports to the committee and to members of the committee. What I'm currently sharing is a electronic version of the quarterly reports that Mr. Skriker and his team has been working on. It is still work in progress for now, but this provides with real-time digital information with regards to the performance of the institution. On the left-hand side, you would see what are the planned targets. On the right-hand side, you would see what is the actual performance. So if somebody, for example, updates an area now, in a few seconds, this information will then change, and then it will then be available at the click of the button. Maybe just to respond to partially respond to Member Bartman's additional question, we also have a tab that speaks of strategic documents. If we click on the strategic documents, there's a whole list of information that would be available as a link from this specific system. If we then, for example, go and look at written replies, and we look for the month of May 2021, those written replies to questions would then also be available through this portal that our IT colleagues are working on. So maybe in future, when we are completed with the development and with the 1 or 2 upgrades, the users and members of the POC would then have viewing rights only to the performance information of the WCPP, how we are performing with it even before us coming to the POC to do presentations, and that will be available electronically through this system, and then also access to documents. Thank you, Chairperson, for the indulgence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for sharing that with us. That's amazing. I think that's a wonderful innovation, and it certainly brings the provincial parliament into the fourth industrial revolution. It would be great for us as committee members to be able to, at a glance, see what's going on in real time. This is fantastic. Would you keep us updated on timelines? Because what we might want to do is, when you're ready, for us to have a briefing on it so that we can understand how it works and how the system, we can interact with the system to view it.
That would be done. Thank you, as Chairperson.
Thank you, and well done. Mr. Speaker?
Chairperson, as a design of the system, as the development of the system is being finalized periodically, one of the things that has been raised constantly, and I think it's because members want to know the performance of the individual member in terms of questions, interpellations, motions, and so forth and so forth. So it will also be one of the considerations to customize it so that a member can see, these are my questions for the year, or these are the questions for time to date, and so forth and so forth. So that is one of the things that I've asked the ICT unit to look into, in order to make it easier for members to follow the work that they do. And instead of at times repeating the questions that the members have submitted, that they can see themselves that, no, I've already submitted this set of questions, and therefore I may not have, I don't have to repeat the same questions because responses have been made. And therefore also the responses be customized for members as per the system is being developed. That is one of the intentions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That would be really a wonderful help for members. What is the anticipated timeline for that?
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. Chairperson, there is a meeting in the next few days that will be convened so that the ICT team and our parliamentary support services could be fully briefed on what the requirement is. But like I said, we have the front page of the organizational performance. We'll go down one level into program performance. And then, like the Speaker has indicated, the additional value adds that will be added in terms of information that would be useful for members in terms of their performance in plenary sittings, in committee meetings, and so on. Thank you, Chairperson. I don't have a specific timeline with regards to that, but it should be by the end of the second quarter, Chairperson.
Wonderful, thank you. We look forward to hearing about the progress of this project in our next meeting. All right, and then I'll hand back over to you, Mr. Jawadeen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share the short presentation on the fourth quarter IYM. If the Chair or someone could let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Chair and committee and my members, Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Just with regards to the fourth quarter IYM or financial statements, this report is as of the 31st of March 2021, which is the end of the 2021 financial year. So as at the end of the fourth quarter, we had our adjusted budget was 203,676,000. We had spent an amount of 190,048,000, which is an effective spend of 93% and an underspending of 13 million. This includes the direct charge of which is members' remuneration of 4.6 million. So effectively, our underspending on our voted funds came to about 8.9 million. Which is I'll basically just give a brief summary in the next slides with regards to the reason for that underspending. So of our 203 million budget, we spent 93% of our total budget in the 2021 financial year. With regards to program one, of our total budget in program one of 64 million, we spent 59 million, which is a 92% spend on that. And there was underspending of 5 million in program one. The main reason for that underspending is vacant posts, which were not filled during the course of the 2021 financial year, and some of them are in the process of being finalized in this current financial year, as well as committed funds that was planned for in the 2021 financial year that could not be finalized for various reasons, whether it was COVID or the timing of actual expenditure. Other reasons for the underspending, if you look at specifically the high ones in HR, there is a vacancy there, as well as there was a number of training intervention planned that was taking place, as well as was to be taken place, which was not finalized by the end of the financial year. The majority of that training was committed funds, so that has been approved by the Speaker in the rollover for this financial year. Just to make a note specifically, Chairperson, that of the 8.9 million I mentioned earlier of underspending, according to Fund Plus Section 23, we do roll over that funds into this current financial year and the outer year, and the Speaker has approved the rollover as well as a plan as to how that rollover will be spent. The underspending on the members' remuneration, obviously as per Section 23 of FAMPLA, that we do not retain, and that has been paid over to the Provincial Revenue Fund, specifically with regards to the rollover. Like I mentioned under Program 1, other reasons for the underspending, specific reasons, if you look at ITDS, that was mentioned regarding the move over to the new SAGE system. So that was planned throughout the financial year, but only need to be finalized in this financial year. So that fund was rolled over for that as well. So that's the main reason for the underspending Program 1. Then for Program 2 of the budget of 19.2 million, we spent 18 million, which is also 93% spent, and there we had a underspending of 1.2 million. The main reason for that underspending is bakery clothes, as well as reduction in cost due to COVID during the financial year, for example, catering and travel within the Standing Committee's budget. For Program 3 of the budget of 12.9 million, we only spent 10 million, which is a 77% spend of the budget, or 70-80 rounded up. And there we had an underspending of 2.8 million. There were specifically a reason for the underspending for that, and it also links to the rollover and committed funds, as I mentioned earlier. So under stakeholder management and communication services, the corporate video, which was planned to be finalized in the previous financial year, was not finalized, and that has been rolled over into this financial year to finalize that expenditure in this current financial year. And then within public education and outreach, there was two quite big projects specifically in the financial year that could not be finalized in last year. It's the stakeholder database, as well as the Tetanati workshop, which is in the process of being finalized in this financial year. So that expenditure under expenditure has also been committed or rolled over into this current financial year for finalization. With regards to Program 4 allowances, there we're actually showing of a budget of 55.2 million. We spent 55.4, so we're slightly over on that budget. So we overspent on that budget of 284,000. The main reason for that was under allowances, under members' allowance, and the reason for that is during the early part of 2021, because of COVID, we had to based on a meeting with Provincial Treasury and the fiscal constraints of the country, we were forced to cut our budget, and we cut our budget by about 12%, which came to about almost 20 million. And then we had to look at various places to cut our budget holistically across the board. And one of the areas, obviously the areas we did cut specifically, and we thought we would not be spending as much, was also the allowances under travel for members. However, as activity increased during the year, and we went from the different levels of the COVID response, that obviously increased. So the spend on members' travel was more than what we had initially cut. However, with regards to that over expenditure, we have absorbed that, and we have the environment has been approved for that. So where that small amount has gone over, we have absorbed that within our underspending in the other programs specifically for that purposes. Then under Program 5, charge, which is the members' remuneration of the budget of 51.7 million. We only paid 47 million, and there we have an effective spend of 91,000. So there we have an underspending of 4.6 million. The reason for that is specifically because the members did not get a salary increase in the prior year, and hence the under expenditure on direct charges due to the fact that there was no increases. And like mentioned previously, unlike our voted funds, which we do roll over for utilization in future years, in this year and next year, the FAMPLA, Section 23 of FAMPLA does specifically say that the direct charge underspending must be returned to the Provincial Revenue Fund, which has been done now in the previous month in May. Chair, that's a summary of the fourth quarter expenditure. Thank you very much. I'm not sure any questions on that, anything specific on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, would you like to add?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Mr. Jawuddin and the CFO for this report. Chairperson and honourable members would recall that Mr. Jawuddin had indicated that one of the reasons for the underspending is the vacancies. Chairperson, Mr. Titus would, in augmenting my response, give an indication of what the plan is, but we have put a plan in place for the filling of what we consider to be critical vacancies by the end of September, being the second quarter, and then every quarter thereafter. Maybe then also to report, we have concluded the process for the filling of our last vacant senior manager position, director position. It's the Director Strategy and Institutional Oversight, and soon we would then have a full complement of senior managers within the institution. There's one manager position that is vacant, and there are ongoing conversations, but the idea is also that that is one of the posts that will be filled by the end of the second quarter, Chairperson. So with regards to vacancies and the knock-on effect on the underspend in terms of the budget, there is a plan in place that will attend to those vacancies. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any questions from members? Let me open my document here then. Right. So my first question is on program 3, public engagement. I see there's an overspend there. I note that particular line item doesn't have any targets set against it. So I'd just like to understand, is that purely salary, or what is included in that line item and what caused it to be overspent?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, that is within the COE, that particular program management sub-program, each salaries is paid from there, salaries as well as data and cell phone allowances. So that would be particularly with regards to that there's no real goods and services within that sub-program. So she is correct that sub-program is mainly salaries from there.
Right, so the overspend is as a result of probably data, is that correct?
Correct, because of the revised policy regarding the work from home. There was an overspend on claims for data. So it's a 5,000 rand overspend, particularly because of that. Okay,
perfect. That's definitely reasonable. Then, and then I just wanted to understand the direct charges. You did explain, Mr. Jawuddin, that the members didn't get a salary increase, and that's why there's an underspend there. But so how does that work then? Because this comes directly from Treasury to WCPP for the payment of member salaries, which is set elsewhere through the Remuneration of Public Office Bearers Act. Does that mean that Treasury had contemplated an increase which then never materialized, and so all legislatures have an underspend which now will return to the fiscus? Or is it a different situation? I just want to understand whether I'm understanding correctly.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Yes, correct. With regards to direct charge, in the budget process, which is normally done in the year before we submit a budget, we do, in conjunction with Provincial Treasury, estimate a provisional or estimated increase for member salaries, which is then incorporated into the budget. But yes, the FAT fund does come from the provision from Provincial Revenue Fund. But like mentioned, we do make provision at the year before in the event that there is an increase. So obviously, in this case, we had made provision for an increase, and there was no increase materialized throughout the financial year. So any underspending, which will be the same for the rest of the legislative sector, if there was no increase approved, then any underspending specifically on member salaries would have to be returned to the fiscus or the Provincial Revenue Fund. But Chairperson is correct in the sense that a provision is made, and if that provision is, though that salary increase is not approved, then the rest of the other provincial legislatures would also have a underspending based on the fact that if there was no increase or no increase or less than provided increase for per member salaries.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks very much. And then, sorry, I want to go back to program 3 as my final question. Sorry, I've neglected to ask it at the time. You mentioned that there were, 2 main projects that were being worked on that were driving expenditure, and one was the database, the database of
stakeholder database.
Stakeholders. Thank you. I'd like to understand what kind of expenditure does the compilation of a database require? Is it a program, is it software or yeah, just to understand what drives that expenditure for the database, please.
Chair, James, the acting director in that particular program, would be able to elaborate, but just to say that there is specifically a process underway with regards to that very discussion with regards to what expenditure, what that project includes, what software, etc. But James should be able to provide a background of that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Retief.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, the database is a software application that is going to be developed. Calling it a database doesn't do justice to the functionality of what this system is going to be able to do. So besides being a database of stakeholders and all of their contact information, and then obviously there'll be lots of categories and things like that for specific areas, geographical areas, etc., so that you can query the information and get reports. But the database will also be able to be used to actually communicate with stakeholders. So you would be able to select a group of stakeholders by geographical area or by field of interest, and you would be able to communicate with them by email or SMS or WhatsApp, etc., even by social media. So it is quite a comprehensive application that is being developed. We actually had our inception meeting with the service provider that has been appointed last week, and the business requirements meetings are going to start happening from next week, and we're looking at a 3-month project term, so we'll be getting this out reasonably soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Retief. I'll now hand over to Honourable Bartman to pose your questions.
Thank you much, Chairperson. I have one follow-up based on a question you asked and a few others. The follow-up question regarding the database of the software application, if you want to call it that, and then you can communicate with stakeholders. Recently, in one of our committees in Finance, Dev, we were asking about how can we please communicate with stakeholders via paid social media, such as Facebook, for example, because in the world that we're living in 2021, many people don't necessarily read their emails, and they don't necessarily want to read the newspaper or buy the newspaper, or they don't have access to a radio station. Like in Langsburg, there's no radio station, there's no newspaper. But for example, you could easily use WhatsApp and Facebook to communicate with people. And especially if someone is not already following the WCBP page, paid social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, whatever, can reach a category of people. When you say, for example, we want to reach City of Cape Town female who are working in this industry, for example. So how is the system going to assist us? Because I've received answers back that we can't necessarily do paid media on social media, which was just a bit concerning for me. So just on that. And then new questions. It was indicated in program 1 that the IT fund rollover is the main reason for that rollover, but the rollover is 1.5 million rand for the IT part, and the amount that's underexpended is 5 million. So it can't be the main reason. It can be part of the main reasons likely, but the other big amounts in that program is 1.4 million in human resources, 537,000 in program management, leadership and administration, and 511,000 for legal services. Now, the human resources one, I think I kind of understand because the secretary indicated the respective critical vacancies, and legal services I can kind of understand because one does not proactively always use legal services. But if we can just get an explanation for the other funds, and if there's something that I'm missing in that particular regard. Program 2, there was 446,000 regarding standing committees that were not spent. And I just wanted to understand, how does approval for funding when committees ask for expenditure to be approved occur. And I think this is just so that I can understand, because similarly in the EcoDev committee, I found it very difficult asking for capacitation of members. We were working towards attending the Africa Energy Endowment virtually, and this was the first year that they were doing it virtually, so it was a big savings cost that they afforded participants, and also they gave us a discount because they were so excited that public representatives actually wanted to attend, and you could use it then, that information, in order to also hold people accountable in the respective government institutions. So I just wanted, and it was very difficult getting it approved, and then at the end we found that we actually have an under expenditure. So I just want to understand the approval of expenditure when committees have resolutions. And then in program, there's also an under expenditure at public education outreach of about 1.5 million and stakeholder management 1.3. Is that related to the IT system that is now going to be implemented? Or if we can just have some information on that, please, because I'm not exactly sure what that money was supposed to be for. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over to the administration.
Thank you, Chair. If I may start from Member Bartman's questions from Program 1. I did touch on the biggest ones, but if I can maybe just touch on the other items Member Bartman has mentioned. So under Program Management, the main reason for the 537,000 is I used a collective response for some of them. That's for a vacancy within, or vacancies within that sub-program, which is the main reason for that underspending. Under legal services, during the year, the was less litigation than what was originally planned, so that the reason for the legal fees is because of the fact that we spend less than what we had projected. If I look at other main ones with regards to human resources, like I mentioned previously as well, the human resources one was the fact that there was a vacant post within that sub-program, as well as many training interventions that was planned but did not take place, which is now currently taking place in the first quarter of this year. So the main two reasons for HR is the vacant post, as well as all the training interventions that's taking place. Under knowledge management, there's an underspending of 384. If I can maybe just touch on that. That's relating to the sittings and the translation and transcription specifically being less during the financial year due to the fact that there was less sittings in the COVID year. Under information technologies, that 1.5 million which I did speak about earlier, there was vacant posts within that post, as well as a big underspending for the rollover of the SAGE project, which is in the process of being finalized, and that is in excess of $500,000, particularly for that one project. And logistical services, the 324,000 underspending there. The main reason there was regards to GMT invoices specifically, which was not finalized at the end of the financial year, but is currently under dispute or at the end of the year was under dispute and paid within this current financial year. That's with regards to Program 1 and the amounts for the 5.1 million. So like I mentioned, the reason I summarized it, the 5 million was the fact that the majority of the savings is vacant posts, as well as the big expenditure item that did not happen in human resources, ITTS, which is SAGE. Like I said, the human resources, the training, the program management is the vacant posts, legal services less than previously. Under supply chain management, there's less stationery and printer cartridges that was purchased than what was previously due to the fact that staff is working from home. And under logistical services, less spent on GMT transport vehicles specifically in the financial year. Under Program 2, the question was with regards to standing committees. I think that was a two-pronged question specifically with regards to what the under expenditure was. So that main reason for that 446 is the fact that we were in a COVID hit year, so the expenditure, for example, on catering was less, on members' travel and travel was less. The member needs are specifically with regards to our funds approved within the standing committee. So for each sub-program, WCPP appoints a sub-program manager or a budget holder who is then responsible specifically for the managing of that budget. So obviously that sub-program manager would implement internal processes with regards to how WCPP stays within that budget. If there is an under expenditure, we do discuss it in our monthly IWA meetings where we are notified. Like, for example, we were notified that during the year there will be less catering, transport, etc. However, if there is additional requests that is over and above the budget, that would normally have to be discussed within the sub-program. And if the budget cannot be accommodated, that needs to be taken up via a submission for provision either to be made for that, or if there's no funds available, an internal decision from the institution needs to be made with regards to whether funds is required for that, or whether the requirements are met particularly for that. But to answer the member's question with regards to the process, that I said, like I mentioned earlier, each sub-program, as we have in the different programs here, would have a budget holder who's responsible, or unenviable responsibility would be to ensure that the budget is monitored, managed, and fairly within the standing committees is, I can call it, monitored and managed within the budget. And I think the chairperson's forum also speaks about with regards to the spend of the different standing committees within the different requirements within those individual committees. Then with the question with regards to program 3, the member is correct. The big spend of 1.3 million under public in education outreach is those two projects that James mentioned earlier, the stakeholder database, which is a projected amount of 750,000 for that, as well as another project for also adding up to 750,000 for the school the Tetanate project or workshop. So those two projects were rolled over of it to 750,000 equally. So if you add those two up, it comes to 1.5 million of the 1533 underspending, particularly under PEO. So that's the reason for that underspend. Under stakeholder database, the 1.3 million, the main reason for that is the planned corporate video, which was not finalized in the 2021 financial year, which is also rolled over into this financial year for the finalization. I know we are currently in the process of the procurement process of the bid adjudication process for that currently. So that 1.3 million, the majority of that, or the reason for that underspending is the finalization of the corporate video. I think that's covered the questions of Member Bartman. If I can just get confirmation from that, Chair. And I think James might be able to give some more details on others, Chair, if I may.
Thank you very much, Mr. Retief.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just Member Bartman's question or issue that she raised about the targeted social media advertising campaigns and so on. It is unfortunately not something that we can accommodate at the moment. The purchasing of social media advertising campaigns can only be done with a credit card, and our credit card policy doesn't make provision for that at the moment. We are going to be engaging with our colleagues in the procurement line function and finance line function to see how we can address this. We did make contact with colleagues of ours at the city and at the Western Cape government, but they work in a very different way to the way that we do, through large advertising agencies that they have contracts with and so on. And we're not in that kind of league, but it is something that we are looking at, and we are looking at it quite urgently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairperson. If you maybe would just allow me, if Mr. Retief can maybe just, I think Member Bartman had asked specifically also about our database. In the initial response, there was an indication that the database would also be able to be used for communicating with specific target audiences that are on the database. How that could possibly work towards responding to the question that Member Bartman had asked, because Member Bartman was quite specific in the CBD, females from a specific sector or cluster. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions on that, let me just check. Any further questions? Does not seem so. Then, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to confirm whether you received any instructions in terms of Section 37.6 or Section 66.2 of the FAMPLA.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, in the fourth quarter of the 2020-21 financial year, it being January 2021 to March 2021, the Secretary has not received any written instructions in terms of Section 37.6 and Section 66T of FAMPLA. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We'll make notes of that in our committee report. All right, then let's move on to the fourth and final item on the agenda, aside from the committee deliberations, which is the readiness of the WCPP in terms of the POPI Act. I will then hand over to Advocate LaRue. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you.
Sorry for that delay. Good morning, Chairperson, members, colleagues. I've been asked to do a presentation on the readiness of the legislature to be compliant with the Protection of Personal Information Act. I don't think I will be taking too much time. I'm going to start just with a brief background. I think some of us may be quite familiar with this, and for others of us, it might be less familiar. In 2013, the President assented to the Protection of Personal Information Act. So the Act has been around for quite a while, and it's taken quite a long time for things to come to a point where that Act was ready to become operative. Notably, it was necessary to establish the information regulator and to get certain regulations in place to provide for implementation of the Act. So on the 22nd of June 2020, the President issued a proclamation providing for commencement of the Act on the 1st of July 2020. So that's about a couple of weeks away from when we have to be compliant. So the legislature must be compliant with the Act by no later than the 1st of July 2021. What the Act requires, briefly, the Act requires that personal information must be processed in a manner that complies with 8 conditions, and then the particulars of those conditions are set out in detail in the Act. I can maybe just observe here that the Act doesn't necessarily stipulate the particulars of exactly how each institution should ensure that the personal information is processed lawfully, and it's more a principle-based approach than a detailed compliance approach. So the legislature is expected to ensure that within its context, it complies with certain principles. What the legislature has done to date, specifically in respect of training and the creation of awareness, in March of this year, the administration arranged for the training of all senior managers and all managers, as well as senior officers and other staff members who are involved with the processing of personal information. I don't have the exact number, but I think about 40 of our staff members underwent the training. The training was over a period of 2 days, so it was quite detailed. The training addressed the conditions for the lawful processing of personal information, and it was the objective to ensure that staff understand what personal information is, where we keep our personal information, and how we should go about processing personal information lawfully. And then also there was a creation of internal awareness, where information was shared with staff, notably on what is the POPI, what is personal information, how should personal information be processed, and so forth. And I think that the creation of awareness was also for the staff that did not attend training specifically, just to make sure that there is a appreciation in the legislature of the POPI and what it involves. Also in March 2021, the Secretary appointed an Information Monitoring Committee. That name will probably change, well, it will change soon. The Deputy Information Officer, which is myself, chairs the committee, and it was essentially the objective of the committee to facilitate the process of ensuring that the legislature is compliant with the Act by the due dates. As I said, the 1st July of this year. And then I think this is maybe as far as readiness is concerned, the following 3 bullet points I think are the most important ones. There are 3 important steps that the legislature needs to take to make sure that it is compliant. The first one, and this is required by the regulations issued in terms of the Act, is that the legislature had to complete a personal information impact assessment. The administration completed this personal information impact assessment, where the institution identified briefly what personal information we have, where the personal information is kept, who is responsible for processing the personal information, what is the reasons why the purposes for which we are processing this personal information, and do we communicate the personal information to any third parties outside of the legislature, and so on. The committee, I would maybe make that past tense, was in the process of completing an implementation schedule. So the objective with that is having completed the personal information impact assessment, what kind of measures should the legislature put in place to ensure that we process personal information lawfully and appropriately. So the implementation schedule identifies, and that's already been done, identifies the sort of notices and consent forms, agreements, etc., that we need to put in place to ensure that we are compliant with the Act. As indicated there, the implementation schedule was to be finalized by the 4th of June. It has been done, and the process for preparing and drafting these notices and consent forms, etc., is ongoing and should be completed in the next week or 2. I think our operator agreements should be ready by next week, and then the other consent notices, etc., should be ready the week after that. It's the timelines are a bit tight, but I think we are still heading in the right direction. And the second important point for compliance is the registration of information officers. That has already taken place. And then the regulations also require that we must have a compliance framework, which is essentially a policy document that will indicate how the legislature will go about processing personal information, what are the sort of principles and processes, etc., that we follow. The Information Monitoring Committee approved a compliance framework, which was submitted to the information officer. Again, here also the presentation is maybe a day behind the facts. The compliance framework was approved yesterday by the Secretary as the information officer. So we have a compliance framework, and the compliance framework will commence on the 1st of July 2021. So at this point in time, I think the focus is really on the implementation schedule and drafting the legal documents that needs to be drafted to give effect to that, and then to get those documents in place. Chairperson, thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Leroux. Are there any questions from members? If I may ask, do you want to go ahead first, Honourable Lecker?
No, I can go second, Chair.
Okay, all right. Advocate Leroux, I just wanted to find out then, does this require any changes for any parliamentary practice and procedure? So, for example, sometimes members will ask a written or oral question that relates to somebody that is not in the legislature, and that information is then provided by a department, and that is then published as a public document. Does POPI affect that, for example? And have we looked at things like, and I don't know if this is the right forum and perhaps something to take up in the conduct committee, does the code of conduct with the information that is publicly available, does that need to comply with POPI, or are public representatives, for example, exempted from the protections of POPI? Thank you. Honourable Lecker, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question, Chair, is maybe let me first welcome the presentation. I would like to latch on your latter question, but phrase it differently in that what happens when one may want to get access to the closed section part of the information that is provided to the office of the registrar. Can the same POPI Act be used to access such information? Two, in cases where information is leaked, either to a member or to anyone from outside, does it prevent such information from being used if it has not been processed in the right way? What does the Act say to that regard? I'm looking at this thing of limitation. To what extent can this POPI Act be used? Thank you.
Thank you. Advocate Leroux.
Chairperson, thank you. You asked some interesting questions. Firstly, on the question of personal information that becomes available through house processes, I would say, well, firstly, I would say that that has not yet been identified as an area of concern, but it may well need to. We may well need to look into that. I would imagine that certain personal information, if there's no proper public law purpose for disclosing that sort of personal information in a house process or in a house papers, then there should be considerations for not disclosing that kind of information. So in short, I would say that has not yet been identified as an area we need to look at, but I think now that you've raised the issue, I do think that we may need to look at that, and that it may well be necessary to put some measures in place just to make sure that personal information is not unnecessarily disclosed, especially identifying information like residential addresses and things like that. Then on the code of conduct, I would yes, that will have to comply with the POPI. I think the question there relates to the issue of the non-disclosable part of the register, and I think maybe the registrar would be in a better position to answer that. But I think that is the non-disclosable part of the register is a good example of the type of personal information that should ordinarily be protected, because that would include kind of residential addresses and maybe information concerning family members and things like that. So I would say that the code of conduct already makes provision for the protection of that kind of information. Of course, the information that is publicly available in terms of the POPI, one would probably say that that is information that serves a legitimate public law purpose in respect of the disclosure of certain the information of assets, etc., of members. There was a question regarding access to the closed portion of the register of members' interests. I think I'm not going to express an opinion on whether one would grant access to that or the circumstances under which one could grant access to that information. But certainly one could make a request in terms of the Promotion of Access to Information Act, and then the principles in that act will have to be applied, of course, read together also with the Code of Conduct Act, to see whether that information can be disclosed and under what circumstances that kind of information can be disclosed. And then there was a question concerning the leaking of information. There is an obligation in the POPI Act on should a person become aware of the fact that personal information has leaked or that there's been some sort of a security breach, then that fact must be reported. And then it also puts an obligation on institutions that process personal information, that should personal information have leaked, then the data subjects or the persons to whom whose personal information it is must then be informed of the fact that there was a leak and the extent of the leak and so forth. Chair, I think that answers the questions.
Thank you very much, Advocate Leroux. This is something I will then raise in the next conduct committee so that we can just be clear on how POPI and the Code of Conduct Act link in together and whether any considerations are required. Thank you. Very interesting presentation. Are there any final questions then on the POPI Act presentation? Does not seem so. All right, then I'd like to thank all the officials from the WCPP for your hard work in putting all this information together and for reporting constantly to this committee. We're very grateful for your efforts and for the hard work that you do. The committee is now going to move on to some internal administration. So I just want to check, Mr. Speaker or Mr. Secretary, would you like to make any concluding remarks before I give thanks?
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, I have nothing to add. I just want to thank you for your engagement insofar as the work that we do and the interest in ensuring that we continue to make this Parliament a beacon of hope and the Parliament that truly represents the people of the Western Cape in our diverse nature. And we'll continue to do so in ensuring that we account for everything that we do. The beauty of this committee, Chair, is that we are in the same space, but of course, it's important that we bring those suggestions, ideas in where we can also improve in the work that we do. So I would like to thank all the committee members, the Deputy Speaker, the Secretary and the SMT and the Office of the Speaker. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And thank you again to the WCPP, the managers, the Secretary, and all the staff that have made this reporting possible. So on that note, thank you very much. You may be excused. And if the committee members would stay behind, please. All right,
Thank
members.
You, Chairperson. Thank you, Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
Okay. Mr. Davids has dropped off the line. He has load shedding. And so we have Ms. Klutter that will be assisting us. I'm going to, with your permission, move item 6 next. I just think for the flow, it was easier if we adopt the committee report on the 4th quarterly financial and performance reports first, and then move on to the other committee documents. So if I could ask if we could just beam up the committee report. There we are. I'm going to read it out loud for the benefit of all members. Report on the Parliamentary Oversight Committee, having considered the quarterly financial and performance information for the 4th quarter of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament for the 2020-21 financial year, 11 June 21 as follows. The Parliamentary Oversight Committee reports that it convened on the 11th of June and has concluded its deliberations on the quarterly financial and performance information for the 4th quarter of 2020-21 financial year for WCPP, which was referred to in terms of Standing Rule 89.1 of the WCPP. The committee interrogated the WCPP in terms of the information that was tabled and referred to the committee as legislated under Section 17.2a of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act of 2009. In accordance with Section 37.6 and 66.2 of the FUMPLA, the WCPP reported to the committee that no instructions were issued during the 4th quarter of the 2020-2021 financial year for the WCPP. Are there any objections, or can we proceed to adopt the report?
Chairperson, I move that we adopt.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. Honourable Bartman?
Second, Chair.
Thank you very much. The committee report is then duly adopted. Thank you very much. We then move on to item 5 of the agenda. We're going to look at the minutes of the 18th of March next, in our last meeting. All right, please check attendance. We had a full house. That was when we were dealing with the appropriation bill. All right, any edits or amendments to page 1? Let's move on to page 2. And then resolutions. Okay. Any edits or amendments? If none, can we proceed to adopt?
I move for the adoption, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Lecker. Honourable Allen, will you second?
Seconded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Then let's move on to the 4th quarterly report for 2020-21 financial year. All right, you've all received these on email, but let's just have a look. Page 1 is committee membership. Page 2 is the mandate and the institution reporting. We only have one. Then there's a brief overview, and then those were the 3 meetings I think we had. Yeah. Moving down, attendance, just have a look there. That is correct. Sorry for the goose in the background. Right, moving down. We had one piece of legislation. We had no oversight visits and no invitations. All right, and then our budget with a total spend of R3,206.82. Okay, can we proceed to adopt the quarterly report?
Yes, Chairperson. I move that we adopt.
Thank you. Honourable Bartman.
Seconded, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Then let's move on to the final document for consideration, which is the annual activities report for 2020-21. Okie dokie. So this is our annual report for the Parliamentary Oversight Committee. The first page is membership, an introduction of what we do. Moving on to page 2. It's an overview of the work done over the year. 7 committee meetings, 6 public hearings, and 2 bills considered. Right. If there are no edits or amendments to page 2, let's move on to page 3. Any edits or amendments there? Right. If there are no edits or amendments, could I have can we move to adopt this annual activity report, please?
I move that we adopt, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. Honourable Bartman.
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Great. Committee administration done. Then I just want to check if there are any resolutions, recommendations, or requests for information emanating from this meeting. I would like to just add the information regarding the MOU with the Department of Local Government and the CGE that Mr. Retief undertook to provide the committee, but I think let's just capture that as a request for information, please. Ms. Kluter, sorry.
I've captured it. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
Okay, thank you. Any further resolutions, recommendations, or requests for information, please?
I'm not sure, Chair, but maybe you will advise in respect to the rollout of electronic documentation. Did we get timeframes on that as to when will it be fully implemented?
Are you
if
talking
we
about,
didn't, can.
Are you talking about that dashboard?
Yes.
They said that probably by the end of the 2nd quarter.
Okay,
So
can we get specifics?
They said probably by end of second quarter, which would put us at September. But what we will do is at our next meeting on the first quarterly report for the current financial year is we'll ask them for an update at that point. Would that be okay?
Super, Chair.
Okay, great. I'll just make a note here that we included in the meeting request. All right, if that's all the resolutions and actions for today's meeting, I'd like to thank all members for... sorry, Honourable Bartman.
Apologies, I'm not sure if a person can see the hand function on my phone, but I wanted to find out whether it be possible to get a list of which sub-program manager who is also the budget holder of the respective committees are almost appointed or assigned to which committee. It was also said that that particular budget holder then discusses monthly meetings of the under expenditure or how much the committees have spent. Is it possible for us to either through the chair of chairs or to directly to send through this committee to get monthly reports on those respective budgets presented to the chair of chairs committee or sent to the chairpersons as well, please? Thank you.
I agree, Honourable Bartman, but I do think that's something that we can raise in the chair of chairs meeting later today, because that's usually where the committee budgets are presented. However, if we don't have, if for whatever reason it's not possible there, we can certainly raise it here at POC. Would that be acceptable?
Happy, thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. All right, if that's everything then, thank you very much, members. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much to Ms. Kluter for standing in and to Mr. Davids for the preparations for this meeting. Have a lovely day further.